There was a moment in 15th-century Florence when a single door closed so quietly that almost nobody noticed it. Behind that wooden door, in a room lit by soft candlelight, a banker unfolded a letter sealed with wax. It did not describe a battle or announce the death of a king. It contained numbers, promises, debts, and names. Yet those simple lines would influence popes, shape artists, determine wars, and quietly redirect the future of Europe. History often remembers crowns and swords. But sometimes the world changes because someone understands money better than anyone else. Welcome back. If you enjoy these slow journeys into the forgotten corners of history, consider subscribing and staying with us for many more nights like this one. And if you would like, leave a comment sharing where you are listening from and what time the night has reached where you are. It is always comforting to imagine people across different countries settling into the same story beneath the same sky. Now, allow yourself to settle in. Let the day slowly fade behind you. Relax your shoulders, breathe a little more deeply, and let the noise of the modern world drift away. Tonight, we are traveling to Renaissance Italy, where merchants became princes, where paintings changed civilization, and where one remarkable family discovered that true power did not always sit upon a throne. Florence did not look like the center of the world. It rested among the gentle hills of Tuscany, surrounded by vineyards, olive trees, winding roads, and villages where church bells echoed across the countryside. The river Arno flowed quietly through the city, crossed by sturdy bridges carrying merchants, pilgrims, craftsmen, and travelers. The streets were narrow, lined with tall stone houses whose windows overlooked marketplaces filled with cloth, spices, leather, and voices speaking in accents from across Europe. At dawn, bakers filled the air with the smell of fresh bread. Blacksmiths struck glowing iron with rhythmic hammers. Bells announced the passing hours while monks copied manuscripts beneath dim candlelight. Wealthy merchants discussed business in elegant courtyards while ordinary workers carried heavy loads through crowded streets. It was a city alive with ambition. But beneath this beauty, Florence was restless. Unlike many kingdoms ruled by hereditary monarchs, Florence called itself a republic. In theory, citizens governed themselves through councils and elected officials. In practice, influence belonged to those with wealth, powerful allies, and the ability to persuade others without appearing to rule directly. That distinction would become incredibly important. Because the Medici family rarely called themselves kings. Instead, they became something much more difficult to challenge. To understand how that happened, we need to step back a little further. Europe during the late Middle Ages was changing. Trade routes connected distant cities. Ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying silk, wool, spices, precious metals, and countless other goods. Markets expanded, and with them grew a new kind of influence. Money. Gold coins could cross borders more easily than armies. Merchants who understood finance began solving problems that even kings struggled to manage. Monarchs constantly needed loans to wage wars, build castles, pay soldiers, and maintain their courts. Churches required funding for cathedrals and charitable works. Traders needed secure methods to move wealth across dangerous roads. This created opportunities unlike anything Europe had seen before. Among those opportunities stood a family whose origins were surprisingly modest. The Medici did not begin as emperors or ancient nobles. According to tradition, they came from the countryside of Tuscany. Their earliest history remains somewhat uncertain, and historians debate exactly how quickly they rose. What seems clear is that over generations they learned the business of banking with extraordinary skill. Their greatest advantage was not simply wealth. It was trust. A banker survives only if people believe their money is safe. That belief is fragile. Lose it once, and fortunes disappear overnight. Win it consistently, and entire kingdoms begin knocking on your door. The family established branches of their bank across Europe. Florence, Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges, London, and other important cities became connected through networks of correspondence. Messengers traveled muddy roads carrying carefully written letters that contained coded financial information. These documents represented fortunes greater than many noble estates. Behind every transaction stood careful calculations. Exchange rates shifted. Political alliances changed. Ships were delayed by storms. Kings occasionally refused to repay debts. The Medici learned to navigate these uncertainties with remarkable patience. Yet numbers alone cannot explain their success. Because another decision would transform them forever. They developed an exceptionally close relationship with the Church. The papacy handled enormous financial responsibilities. Taxes, donations, construction projects, and religious administration stretched across Europe. Managing these resources required experienced bankers. The Medici became trusted financial partners. And this changed everything. When a family manages the finances of popes, its influence quietly reaches every corner of Christian Europe. The decision may have seemed practical at first. History would remember it differently. Among the early leaders of the family, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici stands out as the true architect of their fortune. He possessed neither overwhelming military strength nor royal authority. Instead, he understood human nature. He knew that people preferred generosity to arrogance. He avoided unnecessary displays of wealth. He treated customers with respect. He lent carefully. He invested wisely. Most importantly, he recognized that public reputation could become more valuable than gold itself. Florence admired successful merchants but deeply distrusted obvious tyrants. Anyone appearing too ambitious risked creating enemies. Giovanni understood balance. He became rich without seeming threatening. That mattered. When he died in 1429, he left his family not merely an enormous fortune but something even more valuable, a strategy. His son, Cosimo de' Medici, would carry that strategy further than anyone imagined. Cosimo has often been remembered as the father of the Medici dynasty, yet he was not a simple man. History sometimes paints him either as a generous patron of learning or as a calculating political mastermind. The truth lies somewhere between. He genuinely admired knowledge. He also genuinely enjoyed power. Those two qualities shaped the Renaissance itself. Cosimo inherited immense financial resources, but wealth alone did not guarantee safety. Florence remained politically divided. Rival families competed constantly for influence. Public speeches praised Republican liberty while private meetings negotiated alliances behind closed doors. Every handshake carried uncertainty. Every friendship possessed political meaning. Cosimo became extraordinarily skilled at understanding people. He rarely raised his voice. He often listened longer than others. He knew when to compromise and when to wait. Patience became one of his greatest weapons. Yet even patience could not prevent conflict forever. His growing influence frightened rival families, especially the Albizzi. They accused him of seeking too much control. Eventually, Cosimo was arrested. For a brief moment, it seemed the Medici story might end almost as quickly as it had risen. He faced imprisonment and possible execution. Imagine the atmosphere inside Florence. Merchants whispered in market squares. Servants carried rumors through noble houses. Bankers wondered whether deposits remained secure. Ordinary craftsmen watched powerful men struggle for dominance while hoping violence would not reach their own neighborhoods. History often focuses upon famous individuals. But ordinary families also lived through these moments. Parents still worried about feeding children. Workers still opened shops each morning. Life continued beneath political uncertainty. Cosimo escaped execution through negotiation, influence, and perhaps a considerable amount of carefully distributed money. Instead, he was exiled. His enemies celebrated. They believed they had saved Florence. But they misunderstood something essential. The Medici network stretched far beyond city walls. Cosimo remained wealthy. His allies remained loyal. Trade continued. Meanwhile, Florence began suffering economically without him. Businesses slowed. Confidence weakened. The absence of one banker revealed how deeply connected he had become to the city's prosperity. Within a year, political opinion shifted dramatically. Cosimo returned. Crowds welcomed him. His enemies departed into exile instead. The reversal seemed astonishing. Yet beneath the surface, it made sense. Economic stability often influences political loyalty. People rarely support leaders who leave them poorer. From that point onward, Cosimo exercised extraordinary influence while preserving the appearance of republican government. He rarely accepted official titles that suggested dictatorship. Instead, he guided elections, supported allies, resolved disputes, funded public projects, encouraged scholars, helped artists, influenced councils. He ruled almost invisibly. And perhaps that made him stronger than many kings. Around this same time, another transformation quietly unfolded. Europe began rediscovering ancient knowledge. Greek and Roman manuscripts that had been neglected or forgotten attracted renewed interest. Scholars searched monasteries and distant libraries. Refugees fleeing the declining Byzantine Empire carried precious texts westward. Cosimo eagerly supported these efforts. He financed libraries, collected manuscripts, encouraged translations, supported philosophers. To him, knowledge represented prestige. But it also represented civilization itself. Imagine entering one of those libraries. Rows of handwritten volumes rested upon wooden shelves. Ink still smelled fresh upon carefully copied pages. Scholars debated Aristotle beneath high ceilings while sunlight drifted across stone floors. Outside, horses crossed cobbled streets. Inside, ideas that had slept for centuries awakened again. The Renaissance was never created by one family alone. Countless artists, thinkers, craftsmen, and patrons contributed. But the Medici helped provide the financial foundation that allowed creativity to flourish. Without funding, many masterpieces might never have existed. This is where the story becomes even more remarkable. The family supported architects who transformed skylines. They encouraged sculptors experimenting with forgotten classical styles. Young painters found opportunities unavailable elsewhere. Among them stood artists whose names would echo across centuries. A young Michelangelo lived within the Medici household for a time, learning among scholars and surrounded by remarkable collections of ancient sculpture. Leonardo da Vinci received commissions connected with Florence during the broader cultural world the Medici helped cultivate. Sandro Botticelli painted works whose beauty still captures modern audiences. The family did not simply purchase art. They shaped an environment where extraordinary talent could survive. Of course, patronage was never entirely selfless. Magnificent buildings enhanced family prestige. Beautiful churches reflected generosity. Libraries strengthened influence. Art became another language of power. Not loud. Not military. But unforgettable. Meanwhile, ordinary Florentines experienced the Renaissance in quieter ways. Construction created employment. Markets expanded. Festivals filled public squares. Religious processions wound through streets illuminated by candles. Children watched enormous cathedral domes rise against the sky. Travelers arrived from distant lands carrying unfamiliar languages and customs. Life became richer, though not necessarily easier. Poverty still existed. Disease remained frightening. Political rivalries continued. History rarely offers perfect golden ages. Even the brightest periods contain shadows. Those shadows grew darker during the rule of Piero de' Medici, Cosimo's son. Unlike his father, Piero struggled with poor health. Leadership became more difficult. Political pressure increased. Banking challenges emerged. Enemies watched carefully for signs of weakness. The Medici remained influential. But cracks had begun appearing. Fortunately for the family, another extraordinary figure soon emerged. Lorenzo de' Medici. Known to history as Lorenzo the Magnificent. The title sounds almost legendary. Yet Lorenzo himself lived with constant uncertainty. He inherited influence at a remarkably young age. Florence admired him. Foreign rulers respected him. Artists depended upon him. Enemies plotted against him. Responsibility arrived early. And it never truly left. Lorenzo possessed remarkable intelligence. He wrote poetry. Discussed philosophy. Negotiated diplomacy. Managed finances. Organized celebrations. Encouraged artistic innovation. He seemed capable of moving comfortably between palace halls, merchant offices, and scholarly gatherings. Yet appearances can be deceptive. Behind every celebration stood difficult decisions. Behind every elegant banquet waited political danger. One spring morning in 1478, danger erupted with shocking violence. The Pizzi conspiracy remains among the most dramatic moments in Renaissance history. The Pizzi family, together with powerful allies, planned to eliminate Medici influence forever. Their chosen location was breathtaking. Florence Cathedral. During Mass. As worshippers gathered beneath Brunelleschi's magnificent dome, prayers filled the enormous space. Candles flickered. Voices echoed softly against stone walls. Then chaos exploded. Assassins attacked Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano. Giuliano was killed. Lorenzo escaped with injuries. Within moments, one family tragedy became a citywide political crisis. Fear spread rapidly. Who supported the conspiracy? Who remained loyal? Could civil war begin? Ordinary citizens locked doors. Merchants closed shops. Messengers raced through streets carrying urgent news. Church bells echoed with unusual meaning. For Lorenzo, grief mixed immediately with survival. He responded decisively. Conspirators faced swift punishment. Some were executed. Others fled. The city demonstrated overwhelming support for the Medici. At least for now. But another challenge soon appeared. Pope Sixtus IV became deeply involved in the conflict. Political relationships deteriorated. War threatened Florence. Lorenzo made an astonishing decision. Instead of relying solely upon armies, he personally traveled to Naples. The journey carried enormous risk. Failure might mean imprisonment or death. Success could save Florence. Diplomacy demanded courage different from battlefield heroics. Lorenzo negotiated patiently. Spoke carefully. Appealed to shared interests. Gradually, tensions eased. His mission helped preserve the city. Once again, influence achieved what violence alone could not. Yet beneath these victories, deeper problems quietly accumulated. The Medici Bank no longer dominated Europe as completely as before. Some branches struggled. Managers made costly mistakes. Loans proved difficult to recover. International politics complicated commerce. Fortunes rise. Fortunes fall. Even the greatest financial institutions remain vulnerable. Lorenzo often prioritized politics and culture over careful banking administration. His legacy became magnificent. But expensive. When he died in 1492, Florence mourned sincerely. Artists lost a patron. Scholars lost a supporter. Friends lost a companion. The city itself seemed to pause. Few realized how dramatically everything was about to change. Because the world surrounding Florence was changing too. France invaded Italy. Foreign armies crossed mountains. Powerful kingdoms increasingly interfered in Italian affairs. Independent city-states found themselves caught between larger ambitions. The Medici position weakened. Then came the fiery sermons of Girolamo Savonarola. He condemned corruption, luxury, vanity, excess. His passionate preaching captivated many Florentines. Bonfires consumed objects considered symbols of worldly pride. Paintings, books, fine clothing, cosmetics, musical instruments. Whether every account has been exaggerated remains debated, but the atmosphere clearly shifted. The city that had celebrated Renaissance splendor now questioned whether such beauty had become sinful. The Medici were expelled. For a while, it appeared their age had ended. History, however, rarely moves in straight lines. Savonarola himself eventually lost support. Political divisions returned. Foreign threats continued. Years passed. The Medici patiently rebuilt alliances. Eventually, they returned to Florence once again. Their resilience remains one of the most remarkable aspects of their story. Defeat did not necessarily mean destruction. Exile became temporary. Influence found new paths. Even more astonishingly, members of the family rose to become popes. Leo X, born Giovanni de' Medici, entered the papacy during one of Christianity's most complicated periods. He loved learning, art, music, ceremony. Yet his reign also coincided with growing dissatisfaction inside the Church. Martin Luther's protests soon challenged long-established religious authority. The Protestant Reformation began reshaping Europe. The timing proved extraordinary. One family's rise had intersected with one of history's greatest religious transformations. Later, another Medici became Pope Clement VII. His papacy witnessed immense difficulties. Among them stood the devastating sack of Rome in 1527. Imperial troops entered the city with catastrophic consequences. Churches, palaces, homes, libraries. Many suffered terribly. The Renaissance world itself seemed shaken. Meanwhile, Florence once again struggled with political uncertainty. Republican movements briefly reappeared. Sieges tested the city. Eventually, Medici authority returned once more, though now in a different form. The family gradually shifted from unofficial influence toward hereditary ducal rule. Ironically, the dynasty that once avoided appearing like monarchs slowly became exactly that. Cosimo I de' Medici emerged as another powerful leader. Do not confuse him with the earlier Cosimo. This later ruler transformed Tuscany into a stronger centralized state. He reorganized administration, strengthened military institutions, expanded infrastructure, commissioned important buildings, consolidated authority. His government reflected changing realities. Europe increasingly favored larger, more centralized political systems. Independent city republics became harder to preserve. The Medici adapted again. Adaptation had always been their greatest talent. Not every decision succeeded. Some policies proved unpopular. Some opponents suffered harsh treatment. Power rarely remains gentle forever. Still, Tuscany achieved greater stability under his leadership. Visitors admired Florence's growing beauty. Palaces expanded. Gardens flourished. Public squares reflected confidence. Art continued shaping identity. One remarkable example remains the Uffizi.